As a traveling missionary, I've seen a lot of things that have connected me to God. The world's a beautiful place filled with all kinds of people working their hardest to serve His glory. But there have been times when my faith have wavered. This incident happened around 4 years ago while I was traveling to Jerusalem for a chance to visit the Holy City. Even before I boarded my flight to Israel, I had been dealing with issues that tested me. My mother had been battling cancer for some time, and I had taken a short break from my God-given assignment to visit her in my home country of Greece. That was probably a mistake, because I saw how the disease was wrecking her body. I had to come to terms with the fact that she wouldn't be on this earth much longer. She would tell me, "You mustn't cry, my son. I can't weep for someone who is on their way to visit the Lord." I kept a straight face for her, but inwardly I was tormented. I was questioning my faith because the prayers I offered for her well-being were going unanswered. It made little sense to me, because I had seen how God healed others during my missionary work. Then why then was my mother being excluded from His mercy? Wasn't she more righteous than the sinners that received His miracles? Just as I was gathering my things from the taxi to go inside the airport, my brother gave me a call to tell me my mom had passed. Even though I thought that I was ready for the news, I felt like I had been crushed by a boulder. Suddenly the world stopped and I cursed God. Told my brother that I had to go, and walked into the airport. I needed to leave and clear my head, and the tour of the Holy Land felt like a chance to reconnect to my spiritual heritage, perhaps even to rekindle my love for God again. Instead, it was a visit from the devil that changed my life on that flight. Perhaps it was because I was still in mourning, but as the flight attendant began to go over safety regulations, I paid no attention to the pale-faced man that brushed past me. I did notice his expression, though. Something in his eyes reminded me of my own inner turmoil. He was carrying a burden, but I had no idea how important that would be until hours later. He was carrying an overhead bag that also bumped against me as he reached his seat. Something jabbed at my side from within the bag, and he mumbled an apology. It felt sharp and cold. The flight attendant finished up her instructions for us and returned to the front. I settled down and checked my phone one last time. I reviewed pictures of my sweet mother and tried my best to keep it together. When I switched the phone off for the flight, it felt as though I was saying goodbye. The woman next to me squeezed my hand. "Father, are you all right?" she whispered. I slipped my phone in my pocket and gave her a curt nod before forcing a smile. Our plane shook gently as we pushed down the runway, and I got a better look at the pale-faced man. As a man of God, I knew that it would be wrong to judge, but something felt off about him. He was nervous and fidgety, constantly looking towards his overhead bag. But I was too tired to give it any further thought, and instead slipped on the free headphones offered by the flight and turned on some soothing music. My flight would last another 8 hours, and I didn't want to bother wasting time wondering about the plight of someone else when I was already experiencing my own crisis. I was about to close my eyes when I felt someone push past me again. I looked back and saw it was the same man, this time rushing to the bathroom as though he needed to vomit. "Poor guy, must not handle flights very well," the woman beside me commented. The entire plane shook, and I grabbed my seat, feeling queasy as well. "That might be me in a few minutes," I admitted. "If you need anything, I'm a registered nurse," she offered me, her kind blue eyes peering in my own. For some reason, she reminded me of my mother again, but I knew it just had to be because of my recent loss. "I'm sure I'll be fine," I told her, just as I heard the most horrific retching sound from the tiny restroom. She frowned as we both listened to the man spilling his guts out, then decided to get up and offer aid. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, tapping on the door softly. "Go away," he screamed back. "I'm going to get one of the flight attendants. Can you keep an eye on him?" she asked. I really didn't want to get involved, but Before I could decline, she was already headed to the front of the plane, so I casually stood up and leaned against the opposite restroom, watching the door and waiting for the man to come out. He kept vomiting for at least another 5 minutes. Each sound he made was worse than the last. It honestly gave me the impression he was dying. And then there was a noise I don't think I'll forget. It was this deep, guttural growl, the kind you might hear from a fearsome predator, followed by the sound of bones breaking. "Sir? Are you all right?" I asked as I knocked on the door. "Leave me!" he shouted back. I looked down and saw little slivers of blood sliding out from under the door and decided to try to unlock the door. I mean, for all we knew, he could be attempting suicide. I looked up to see the attendant arrive with a safety key as she announced she would be opening the door. I'll never forget what we saw inside. The man was hunched over the toilet, clearly in distress and barely breathing. His mouth and cheeks were covered in blood and some sort of brown mucus. There was a string of black slimy goop connecting his tongue to the toilet. Inside the pool of water, I saw what looked like a baby-sized turd filled with shards of glass. It smelled like something had died. The broken slivers of glass had come from the mirror, and it was clear from his scarred arms and face that my guess about self-harm had been right. Immediately, the attendant took a step back and then asked the nurse, "Do you have any medical equipment?" She nodded, pointing to her overhead bag, as we both kept our eyes locked on the man. I had never seen anything this severe before, and it shook me into a petrifying fear. The whole plane suddenly felt very claustrophobic as I realized whatever virus he had could be contagious. Then, just as the nurse reached for the bag, the man moved like a lightning bolt. I saw his eyes turn a dark blood red, and he screamed like a banshee. He grabbed one of the broken pieces of glass that had been lodged in his face and punctured the nurse in the neck. The entire third class suddenly erupted into chaos. Then he reached for his own bag and pulled something out. It must have been the same object that had jabbed me in my side earlier. It looked like some sort of dark statue, the kind you might see in a museum for Assyrian cultures, and suddenly I felt an overwhelming sense of dread fall over me. This wasn't just a man dealing with the disease of his body. His soul was infected with evil, I realized, as he immediately smashed the idol onto the floor of the third-class cabin. As the dark statue broke apart, this ethereal mist emerged with a rasping noise, and I found myself immediately feeling dizzy. I wasn't prepared for this, but my only instinct was to protect all the passengers. "Everyone move to business class now!" I shouted as I reached for the nurse and helped her to her feet. The man was not moving at all. Instead, he was crawling around on his hands and feet like a wild animal, licking up the broken pieces of the idol as everyone began to flee to the next cabin. "We need to get something to block the door!" I shouted as the last passenger ran past me, and I slid the partition door between the cabins closed. I knew that wouldn't hold the stranger for long, though. One of the attendants brought a food cart. We shoved it against the door to block the man in third class, but I still didn't feel safe. Behind me in business class, almost all the passengers were standing up, trying to look at the scene beyond the partition. The injured nurse started to gasp for breath, and I focused my attention on her. "My bag," she whispered as she tried to hold her arm firmly on her windpipe. "Lay her down," I told a few of the people standing close by. Just as they were going to, we heard a loud clang against the door, and I saw the stranger was clawing at the glass. His facial expressions were constantly changing from desperation to anger to confusion and then back to rage. "Please, you don't understand. I'm not in control," he screamed. I knew precisely what we were dealing with. The only problem was I had no clue how to handle this evil. One of the passengers was apparently reading my mind and asked, "Pastor, aren't you going to do something?" I hated to admit my weakness, but I knew I couldn't lie to these innocent people. "I've only seen others perform the rituals. I have no idea how to stop it," I said, looking down at my hands. I was visibly shaking. It made me feel so helpless. The emotion from my mother's passing pushed me over the edge as I sat down and gripped the chair, not even daring to look the passengers in the eye. A few of them stood idly for a moment, perhaps thinking I might overcome my grief quickly. Then the man on the other side of the glass started spitting violently against it, shouting the most obscene things he could as he tried to get through. One man, dressed in what looked like casual business wear, reached up to his bag and unzipped it quickly to pull out a firearm. More people began to panic, but he shouted frantically, "I'm an air marshal! Everyone please stand back!" He aimed his weapon at the man on the other side of the glass. As more people shouted and shoved themselves out of the way, I stood up, blocking his path as I held the food cart in place. "This is just gonna make the demon angrier," I argued. "Hey, what do you expect us to do then? Sit here peacefully while it tears this plane apart?" he said, shoving me aside. "I'm not gonna die today, Father." He fired a single shot that broke through the glass, and the man went flying backwards into the aisle. Some of the crowd cheered, but I knew this wouldn't be a happy ending. Instead, they heard the man choking on his own blood as the strange mist filled his throat and entered his lungs, consuming him, making him convulse. His bones were cracking and snapping as he bent into impossible shapes. Then he lay still, and the passengers cheered again. It was a short-lived celebration. Outside, we heard the rumbling of thunder, and I pushed the crowd out of the way to get a better look. There were dark clouds outside. Lightning and thunder danced across the skies. We had unleashed something unholy. Suddenly, the corpse began to shake again, this time even more violently than before. The unseen force was pulling him up the way a puppet master might its marionette doll, twitching it and tugging at it. The lifeless ghoul was now standing there in the aisle, its dead eyes staring into our souls, hungry for flesh. "Holy Su Encardo Calaza," called. At the same time, lightning struck the plane and the lights flickered. The ghoul burst through the door, the food cart flung to the crowd as though they were ants being pushed aside by the kick of a boot. The dangerous demon gave me a wicked grin, tilting the neck of the stranger towards me and pointing his long, pale finger and cooing, "You should all be taken to hell." The air marshal tried to fire a few more shots towards the ghast, but it was a fruitless effort. The bullets went through him as though his body were now shredded cheese. His only goal seemed to be getting to the woman that tried to help him. It occurred to me that while he was distracted, I might have a way to reach my own bag. I had little to stop the undead creature except perhaps a holy water, a sacrament, or a cross, but it was the best I could do under these circumstances. I crouched down and watched as the demon moved down the aisle, flinging aside passengers as he reached the bleeding nurse. He looked like he wanted to devour her alive. I took my chances. I made a dash towards my bag. I managed to climb over the upside-down food cart and get into the partition door, just as the demonic man crawled over the top of the nurse and her injured body and began to lick at her face. "Your skin shall serve a higher purpose now, Madre," the woman bellowed. As the lights continued to flicker, the plane was beginning to shake even more, as I realized turbulence could knock us out of the sky. Did this beast of hell hope to kill us all? And just as I grabbed my bag, I fell backwards, being jostled around the cabin as the plane started to descend at an alarming rate. An overhead announcement came on as I heard alarms blaring. "Attention passengers, we're making an emergency landing as soon as possible. Please, buckle up, stay in your seats." The demon was breathing black wind into the woman, her own eyes starting to roll into the back of her head as the two bodies began to mesh together. Their skin was fusing the way two melted candles might. It was horrific to behold, but I didn't waver from my plan and opened my bag, taking out the crucifix that I had brought with me. I held it close to me as I turned to see now the mangled bodies were crawling towards the roof of the plane. "Nastara Veras, you're all human. You will die here, in this place, and meet your own mother in hell," the demon shrieked, as it saw the holy item I carried. Both of its mouths were twisted together like grinding gears, as I said the most heartfelt prayer I could think of. "My mother was blessed to walk with saints, and she will cast you out with only a mustard seed of faith," I snapped. But it was hardly enough to do anything for this prince of the underworld. He lunged towards me, the cross burning his misshapen limbs, but his power was overwhelming what little strength I had. The holy relic skid under the next rows of seats as I felt the plane rattle louder and louder. I was close to losing oxygen from the rush as passengers scrambled to try to find safety from the demon. It was pulling its own spine out from between the fused bodies, jabbing it against my side as it taunted me. "You are a weak, pathetic man who hides beneath the shroud of false idols. The glory of hell will swallow you whole," it said with both of its mouths. I thought about my mother, and the likelihood of seeing her in heaven soon, but I could also hear her voice, urging me not to give up. There was still so much I needed to do here on Earth, and that was what compelled me to close my eyes and offer another sincere prayer. This one wasn't for me, but for the souls of those on this flight. Let the Lord guide them, I said. Then I lunged from the emergency exit door and shoved the handle open. At this height, it should never have budged. I knew very well that they were sealed and only after landing would they release, but I was compelled to give it a try. The pressure in the cabin instantly pushed the demon beyond the plane. He was absorbed in the black clouds that were around us, and then, with this newfound strength, I managed to pull the door closed. As it locked in place, I drew in a breath and watched the clouds begin to clear. And then the passengers erupted with cheering, this time for me. I went and I retrieved my cross, put it around my neck. Glory goes to the Lord for offering me his power for this trial, I admitted, as I sat down, my hands covered with blisters. I knew God had to have helped me to face this evil, and as I closed my eyes and relaxed for the remainder of the flight, I saw my mother smiling at me from beyond the grave. My test of faith was over. The evil hadn't won. When we arrived at Jerusalem, I asked the flight crew and passengers to keep this quiet as possible. No praise shall be given except to God for carrying us through, I told them. But since then, I have heard a few stories spread. And often there is one other element that apparently I wasn't aware of, even though I should have known it. The marshal claimed another man was standing by the door, clad in white, with a double-edged sword at his belt. And it's the image that keeps me close to the Lord even now. And I know that with evil still out there, I must remain vigilant. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you for watching today's video on YouTube or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. If you guys are interested, because we're moving into spring right now, that means that the allergy seasons are going to be hitting us. And I don't know if you guys can hear it very well, but it hits me pretty hard. To get yourself past a couple of those allergies, my wife sells tea. I don't know if that's connected, but hey, it's a segue, and my wife sells tea. Check out etsy.com/ivorymonocletea to be able to check out some of the tea that my wife makes. And you can even get a special sticker if you order the MrCreepyPasta tea and you ask for it. It's a sticker of me doing a dab. It's one of my Twitch emotes. And I want to give a big thank you, as always, to all of my Patreon subscribers on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You are the ones that allow me to do stuff like getting specific stories just for the channel. If you guys want to see more of that, then I would really, really, really love if you guys could help support on patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, like some of these wonderful guys, such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Bobby Karman, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, KhaosArts, Kryolinian, Milk and Miel, Celty Sturloson, Zachary, Graffius, It's All About That FOOKIN Music, Goreng Trimagasi, Maria Walker, Tonya Oran, paingravy, Krazy Kid, MrMarcusBlitz, Aika Limchoc, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Dabbles Raz, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Matthew McNeese, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Raltazal, Ficomel, Nana, Nick Weaver, Melted Lake, Tolly Sue, Sky Mara Ravenswood, William King, Darth Milver, Micah Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Nessie, Barterhawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Billy Morrow, Sashi Suzaku, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Freddy Krueger, Nicholas Sicardi, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. You guys, as well as everybody if you look down in the description, and everybody that can even just give $1 to be able to help things out, I really appreciate it. If you guys would like to join this list of names that I horribly, horribly mispronounce, check out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And honestly, even you guys who just listen, you watch, you comment, you like, you subscribe, thank you all. I really appreciate it. And sweet dreams.